Webinar has started.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Diwakar Yadav, Mutual Fund Product Manager from HDFC Securities. Welcome, everyone, in our mutual fund webinar on market outlook and fund update. In today's webinar, we will gain market insights from fund manager Mr. Devender Singhal, and we'll learn about Kotak Multicap Fund, which is approved by the research team. Mr. Devender is associated with Kotak Group since July 2007. He is managing the equity fund for Kotak AMC since August 2015. He is managing asset across multi-cap and hybrid strategies. He has more than 22 years of experience in fund management and equity research, of which last 15 years has been with Kotak. Prior to joining Kotak AMC, he has been part of various PMSs like Kotak, Religare, Carvi, and PN Vijay Financial Services. So welcome, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Diwakar. A very good afternoon to all of you, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to interact with you. I'll try to present my thoughts in as simple words as I can, and if I leave out anything, I'll be more than happy to cover it during the Q&A session therein. So, if we look at the overall context now, specifically when you look at the global economy, the organizations for economic cooperation and development, as you can see in the chart, have given various growth projections. And if you look at it, they are not very, very encouraging. It is actually lower than what it was there in the March quarter, and they are projecting a lower number going forward. So basically, the overall growth rate for the GDP of the countries for the next year is likely to be pretty muted. And that is a fact as we speak therein. If you look at the global commodity index, that is also not giving you any respite. We are clearly seeing that the global commodity index prices वहां पे कमी आ रहे हैं global commodity index के overall. Global अगर PMI की बात करें जो manufacturing index को दर्शाता है, that are also at a low levels, however slightly better than what we saw in the last half of the calendar year 24. अगर हम bond yields की बात करें जो at what rates the people and the countries borrow, you can clearly see that the global bond yields have been volatile, albeit they have been seeing on a slightly lower side of it, but in between there are spikes which are making it volatile for quite some time. On the other side, the global stocks had hit the first record since February. Now, if you look at the NASDAQ index or the MSCI AWI index, it is actually now better than what it was in the last February, which means that the optimism on the equities is basically pretty high, and that is driving the demand therein. China did try to put a tactical stimulus, but the inflation data is still not recovering. So the economy is in a deflation mode for the third month in a row, as well as what is being there. On top of it, if you look at the China's to debt to GDP ratio, it is also pretty strong at almost 250 basis point and has been increasing ever since 2007 onwards. After a long time, we saw Japan receives a record foreign portfolio inflows. And if you look at the data here on this chart, you could see that a spike in the Japanese inflows have happened after quite a long years. So the recent spike of 2025, I think the similar spike was basically what we saw in almost 5-7 years back, and then almost 10 years back in 2005 therein. Now, whenever we talk about markets and economics, we cannot leave behind US, which is the major part of the global trade, as well as one of the leaders in the world economy, which basically tells us where the overall market is going to go. So US is been trying to tackle fundamental challenges. On one side, they have a fiscal deficit, they have a very large current account deficit, and they have a very high debt to GDP ratio. On the fiscal deficit side, the government of US set up a department called DOGE, which was basically earlier headed by Elon Musk, which is trying to find inefficiencies in the government spending and trying to remove that. On the current account deficit, we have all heard and seen what is happening on the tariff side. US has put a lot of tariffs on all the countries in the world. They are now basically signing up deals individually with the countries. July 9th is the deadline when the relief in the tariff is to come out, and will again go back to the regime where the US had put in a very large tariffs on across the countries therein. Having said that, in the morning today, there was a news article which says that the US has signed critical deal with China. We've already seen that happening with UK, and the Trump statement that we are very close to signing a very big deal with India. I think it is steps in the right direction, but they're still trying to manage the current account deficit by putting a higher tariff on these countries. On the debt to GDP side, I think it's a very, very scary situation at 5% interest rates and a $36 billion of debt. It is a pretty difficult situation US has found itself into. The GDP, national debt has basically surpassed GDP. The average debt per citizen of US is close to $110,000. And if you look at it in terms of the taxpayer, it is close to $323,000 and increasing. On top of it, US is dependent upon external savings, which means that a large part of money which comes to US is basically of people outside the US. As per the last available statistics, 60% of all the US assets are currently held by non-US citizens, be it the sovereign funds, be it endowments, be it people, governments in China, US, Russia, Europe, India. The total amount of assets which are there in the US, of that, 60% of which is owned by the foreigners therein. And with what has happened to Russia and to Colombia, where US basically had stopped the payments which they own to them, there is some bit of concern, and the repatriation tax currently, there's been some bit of concern, which is basically leading to some flight of money outside of US into the other geographies therein. Having said that, decoding US policies is like a Pollock painting. This is one of the famous paintings of the abstract artist Sean Pollock. And as you can see, it is as confusing as you want it to be. Uh, the government themselves are not being able to understand what direction the policy making is going on. On one side, the inflation is coming down. On the other side, the fear of tariffs leading to higher inflation is keeping the Fed in a pause mode to lower the interest rates therein. I'm sure you must have all heard out of the taco trade. If you're not aware, taco is Trump's always chickens out, right? So whatever he says, market is basically saying that he'll go back on his words, and then basically the market would go back into its earlier thing. So you can see over the last 5 months odd, there's been various instances when Trump basically has said something which had impacted the market, but it had gone back, the market has moved up. Now we are nearing, as I said earlier, the July 9th deadline on the tariff side. If the US government basically postpone this for a longer period, or is able to get big deals coming in for quite a few of the large economies, I think this is going to be a pretty good thing going forward. Uh, just on this tariff thing, it has not been all very good for the US economy, because the last two tariff hikes had led to a very strong recession in the US. The first one was in 1828. The next one happened 100 years later in 1930. And almost 100 years later in 2025 is a third tariff hike. All of the last two has been accompanied by a very strong recession in the US, and people are basically keenly watching it out in terms of what is going to happen this time around. So if you can see, this is the average rate of all the imports in the US. Now we are back to basically the 1929 levels. So that's not going to be a pretty healthy situation for sure. On the other side, the earning reported by the S&P 500 companies have been pretty strong, especially for the first quarter. We would be now seeing the earnings impact happening for the second quarter. But 78% of the reported companies which happened uh, there have actually reported EPS more than the numbers which were estimated, which is a very good situation to be in. Uh, yeah, this is one chart which one should keep in mind. that the US credit risk is rising. This is the chart which basically says that price of 1 year credit default swaps of the US government is basically increasing. So there are some school of thought which is saying that the way the current US situation is, there is very likely that they may default on one of their debt payments therein, which is not a healthy situation for one of the largest economies in the world. We did mention about this entire tariff thing. It is expected that by the time we would settle up these tariffs, the US tariff on the other side, on the other countries, would settle at in mid-teens number, which is currently around 10% therein, and on the peak side, they said around 26%. There would be some leeway coming in, some trade-offs happening, and the general expectation is that this rate should settle in mid-teens number, which should help cover up some of the US trade deficit for sure. I did mention to you in earlier that almost 60% of the US assets currently is owned by non-US entities. And as you can see, this is the end 2024 data, which basically says that around 56.6%. This number has actually increased over the last 4 months, and currently we are close to 60% therein. Sorry. Coming to the Indian economy, are we the oasis in the desert? Let's find out. India's April industry production growth likely slumped to 1.2% amid sectoral weaknesses. India's manufacturing PMI rose to 3-month low in May to 7.6. The retail inflation eases to a 6-year low of 3.16. The economy grew better than expected at 7.4% in the March quarter. And India's import of oil hit 10-month high in the month of May, as per the data therein. 6 months back, there were various school of thoughts which were saying that the monsoon would be bad, the crop would be bad, and we would see a decline in the production level. Today, as we speak, India has the highest ever food production in FY25, with rice being up by 8.2%, maize up by 12.3%, soybean groundnut up by 16% each, and the total overall grain production up by 6.5% versus the last year therein. I think that's a pretty good situation to be in, which is basically a step towards self-sufficiency in food and other oil grains going forward. The Q4 GDP lift has lifted the entire FY25 growth rate, and we were at around 7.4% for the year, ending the entire year close to 6.5. But I think this is something way below what our potential is. We have grown in the past at around 8-9% and beyond. I think we would do a lot to basically make Indian economy grow faster than what we have been delivering over the last few years. Happy to note that India has become the fourth largest economy, pipping Japan at $4.19 trillion. The per capita GDP currently stands at $2,878 therein. While this is a pretty low number on the per capita side, I think as the overall size of the economy, we are in a good state there. If we look at the emerging sectors, India tops the emerging market tracker in terms of various composite scores, which track the real GDP, PMI manufacturing, export growth, CPI inflation, number of months of imports, exchange rate movement, and stock market capitalization. When we look at the overall score of this index, India stands highest among all the emerging markets in this tracker. While all of this, India has also simultaneously focused on the inclusive growth enablers. For example, the number of affordable households have increased from 1 million in FY50, 1950 to 2015 versus 43.8 million over the last 10 years. The LPG coverage, which was 56% by the end of 2015, now it is almost 100%. The domestic PNG connections have moved up by 6 times over the last 10 years. The number of households with tap water and sanitation access is almost 95%. All the households in the country now gets electricity, while it's a different thing as to how much time it would be there, but it's much better than what the situation was a few years back. The number of households with solar rooftop has gone tenfold in the last 10 years and now stands at 10 million households therein. When we talk of the GDP numbers and we look at the revenue collection numbers, which has been published on a regular basis, as you can see, the collection on the last year, the GST collection over the last year, FY 24 to 25, was around 9.4%. This was slightly lower than the nominal GDP growth. But if we look at the numbers which came out in April and May 2025, this was up at 12.4% and 16.6% year on year, and which was much higher than the nominal GDP growth, which is a good sign to watch out for. We've also seen a lot of rural indicators move sequentially. This was one part of the economy which was not basically showing growth, but that is also now showing growth. Whether be it the two-wheeler registrations or the CMI, rural consumer sentiments, the agricultural export, or the tractor registrations, we are seeing a sequential uptick happening therein. Last but not the least, the reservoir levels are at a pretty high levels. We are seeing a pretty good change on happening on a YOY levels, and as a percentage of live storage at the levels, we are at a pretty good number therein. We're all witnessing monsoon this year, which is coming pretty early. This year, the IMD has predicted that monsoon to be at 106% of long period averages, which is pretty good for the overall crop production for the country, as still a sizable chunk of our agriculture is dependent on timely rains. We did see what the FM did in the last budget, whereby she gave income boosting impact by changing the slabs a bit. There's a 4 to 6% increase in the income for various salaried individuals, totaling to almost 1 lakh crore. The entire money would be available to the taxpayers over the course of the year by lower tax outgo, and some bit of it would go to savings, some bit of it would likely to go to consumption also. We've also already seen with RBI rate cutting rates, the interest component on the EMIs to come down significantly. Uh, I was yesterday looking at the household loans, home loans number. It has now come to as low as 7.25 or 7.5 versus what it was 8.5, 8.75 a year back. This also leaves a lot of money with the end consumers and EMI payers, so the borrowing cost as it comes down. We have been lucky to see crude oil prices being stable after what happened with Russia, Ukraine, and with Iran and Israel recently. We did saw crude spiking up, but it quickly came down as things got settled. So anything below $70, if we are able to manage it at $70 of crude, India would be able to save close to 1 lakh crore over the course of the year. If the crude oil average crude oil purchase settles at around $65, this number would be close to 1.66 lakh crores. And if it goes to $60 per barrel, India would actually end up saving close to 226,000 crores over the course of 1 year. This is a very, very large number. And on top of what the RBI has paid to the government of India in terms of the dividend, which was also a record this year at 2.68 lakh crores, we can be in for a very large stimulus by the government to boost the capex and consumption, both going forward. Having said that, we have seen that the road capex and the budgetary allowance has been a bit stagnant, specifically on the road side. Though we did see the government, the same has been with the railway capex. As you can see, the right three lines, it is not likely to increase from what has been projected therein. Having said that, the government of India has basically done a large part of the capex in the last 3 months. For what we saw last year, the total capex was around 70,000 crores per month. In the month of March and April itself, we saw 2 lakh crores each being spent by the government on the capex. So they want the growth to be upfronted. They want the capex to be upfronted. The RBI has released a lot of liquidity in the market. The interest rates are down, and now it's the time for the Indian corporation to step up the capex and see the growth happening therein. Talking about the equity markets, I think on one side we have seen the rates coming down, while on the other side the markets have moved in the other direction. As can be seen in the chart, these are the returns till 31st of May. On one side, you are seeing the bond yields coming down, and on the other side, you have not seen the equity market returns being on a positive side. On the one side, when the bond yields have moved up, on the other side, you have seen in countries like Euro, Brazil, Korea, we've seen the market moving up therein. So there's hardly any correlation which is being there between the markets and the interest rates therein at this point in time. I think earning surprises has been a mainstay of this entire growth or what has led to this. Not only in India, across the world, the surprise part of the earnings, what was expected, what has been delivered, has been on a positive side, which is where but the market is basically cheering it up. Uh, while interest rates in Japan have moved up, they also have led to a lot of carry trade, which was basically borrow money in Japanese yen and invest in the countries abroad, in assets abroad. That trade has been cut down, and the short positions in the yen have been uh, coming down, and the net longs are improving. Now, this is one interesting chart which you all see on a regular basis. This is the famous Warren Buffett ratio of market cap to the GDP. As you can see, we are on a bit higher side on this. Over the last 20-year average has been 85%, but currently we are close to 126. It is not that we cannot trade at levels above 100%. There are many, many examples. For example, the US market is quoting at 170% to the GDP for a very long time. We have been hovering above 100% for the last 5 years. Uh, as long as the growth rates can sustain, as long as the interest rates is benign, you can see these averages being there for quite some time more. And as I said, the earning grade, the growth in the market cap has been fueled by the growth in the profit increases. So if you see from FY20 onwards, the market cap of India increased by 276%. If you look at the last 5 bars, it has increased by 276%. But if you look at the profit after tax of the Indian uh, market, that has also increased by 350 percentage points. So whatever we were priced in FY20, we're actually now cheaper than what we were in FY20 therein, because the earnings have also moved up pretty sharply. Having said that, you can clearly see that on a long-term averages, the Nifty, the mid-cap index, and the small-cap index are all quoting at a premium to their long-term averages. The large cap is quoting at around 13% premium to its historical average. Mid caps are quoting at a 22% premium to the historical average, and small caps are quoting at a 44% premium to the historical average. And we're not saying that the growth rates are not better for mid cap and small cap. So as long as the growth rate in the profit sustains, these multiples can sustain for some more time. But there is a time to be a bit more cautious in the mid cap and small cap space. And the risk reward today is better in large cap than to be in mid cap and small cap. Not saying that you're not finding opportunities in mid cap and small cap, but on a risk reward basis, it makes better sense to be in larger caps than to be in mid cap and small caps. Yeah, broadly, the FY26 numbers are expected to grow by around 12% on the Nifty, which is basically a pretty decent number if you look at it. The DII's monthly flow into the equity market continues to be pretty robust. We did saw around $7.9 billion of investment coming up in the month of May. Uh, Also, there is a very strong case that whenever, if there is any steep fall in the market, there's a lot of ammunition or the cash being available with the mutual funds to deploy it back into the market. The actively traded fund themselves are sitting on around 6.2% cash. As we speak today, it is 5.8%, but close to 2 lakh crores. The balance advantage funds are close to sitting on 1 lakh crores of cash. So together, this amount itself is close to 3 lakh crores. On top of the regular SIPs, which are close to 25,000 crores, the pension fund money, the EPFO money, and the insurance money, we over the next 12 months, almost 6 lakh crores is being made available to the market to absorb any big correction. So we don't expect a large correction to happen in the market as we speak. Over the last 5 years, there have been many stocks which have delivered very fantastic returns. And as you can see, over the number of stocks from the BSE 500 index which have gone up by more than 10 times is 33. The number of stocks which have gone up 5 to 10 times in the BSE 500 index is 41. And the number of stocks which have gone up from 2 to 5 times is 232. A similar number of this 306, which are more than two times over the last 5 years, is 67 out of the NSE 500 index therein. So the market has given return, but I think the important thing to note is, and this is what I would request all of you to pay more attention to, is that this chart, the first column gives you the return which the market gave from December 2005 to January 2020. As you can see, the Nifty 100 gave 11.5%, the Mid Cap 100 gave 11%, the Small Cap 100 gave 7.5%. If you look at the broader index of BSE 500, it gave 10.9%. But over the last 5 years, 5.5 years, what we have seen is that the Nifty 100 has given 14.3%, Mid Cap 100 has given 24.9%, Small Cap 100 has given 22.6%, and BSE 500 has given 16.4%. Believe me, last 25 years into the market, I can safely say that the second column is not the normal. It is not the average return you should expect in the market. What the normal is on the right hand side, which is a 12.5% return, what we have got on the BSE 500 over the long period. NSE 100 12.3, Mid Cap 100 14.8, and Small Cap Index 11.6% is what the return is over the last 20 years and not what you have seen in the last 5 years therein. So please keep your expectations reasonable in the market. A low double-digit number is definitely is a very high probability event to get over the next 5 years and 10 years for sure. I think there is no other asset class which can give you better returns than the equity markets over the longer period. So keep your faith, but keep your expectations moderate so that you don't get disappointed and you are in sync with what your earnings expectations and your growth potentials are in the market for you to stay longer. Now, I would also like to spare some time on this Kotak Multicap Fund, which is basically a fund that is mix of a large cap, mid cap, and small cap stocks that come together as a dream team to create winning opportunities. This is an open-ended scheme investing across large cap, mid cap, and small cap stocks at all points in time. Now, why is the need for such fund arise and what can it be done? See, if this is a table which gives you the calendar year returns of Nifty 100, Nifty Mid Cap 150, and Nifty Small Cap 250. Now, if you look at these returns over a period of time over the last 15 years, you would realize that one category outperforms the other by quite a few distance over the years. So in some year, you would have mid cap index outperforming. In some year, it would be a large cap. In some year, it would be a mid cap. Now, could there be an option which can help you navigate the situation to your benefit? Yes, the answer to that is Kotak Multicap. Having said that, one should always be aware that higher returns comes with higher risk, and we need to manage this risk to get commensurate returns therein with lower drawdowns. So, what does Kotak Multicap Fund do? Basically, it invests a minimum of 25% in large cap, 25% in small cap, and 25% in mid cap. The large cap gives you relatively stable returns and lower volatility. Mid cap gives you moderate returns with moderate volatility. Small cap has a potential for higher returns and comes with higher volatility. So the 75% is locked in 25, 25, 25. The balance 25% is dynamic allocation depending on our model. The model helps us tell when to go overweight small cap and mid cap stocks therein. Whenever we go overweight, it tells us how long to remain overweight for you to benefit from being overweight in mid cap and small cap therein. So if you can see this model, the chart on the there, you can see the green one, the first column is the model return, and below you can see the kind of alpha generation happened which is basically over the Nifty 50, the Nifty 500, and the Multicap 50 25 TRI therein. So we have been able to outperform in 12 out of 18 calendar years just based on the model allocations therein. So the answer is what has been in the past, how has been the model basically behaved, how many times it has gone overweight, mid cap, and small cap, and what were those instances? Yes, a very right question. See, the model has been overweight 61% of the time. It has been base case, which is the neutral weight, 48% in large cap, 26 in mid cap, and 26 in small cap for 61% of the time. Only in 17% of the time, the model has gone overweight in mid caps. Two such instances were in July 2013 and September 2019. And 22% of the time, it has gone overweight in small caps. The timing was December 2008 and March 2020. Now, if you closely look at these times, this was a time when the market pessimism was at the most, right? So the model preempts the turnaround of mid cap and small cap, gives us ample time to invest in these market caps, and so that we can ride a long way, getting the outperformance therein. This has been the chart. We will be completing 4 years of this product in September 2025. This has been the allocations to the large cap, mid cap, and small cap over the last 4 years as we speak. If you look at the portfolio, financial services is around 24%, auto and automobiles is around 11.3%, IT is around 9%, consumer services 7%, oil and gas 6.3%, FMCG 6.2%, and so much. The top 10 sectors constitutes around 84% of the portfolio. The biggest part and the most highlighting part of this strategy is that almost 82% of the portfolio has an active share, which means it strategically diverges from the benchmark with an aim to capitalize market opportunities and create alpha. Now, I did mention to you that we don't see a big correction happening as we speak because there's a lot of dry powder which is being available in the market. Having said that, if you look at the history of the market from 1980 to 2023, every single year there has been a 10 to 20% temporary decline in the market with an average drawdown of 21% from the top. Only in 4 out of the last 44 calendar years, the intra-year decline has been less than 10%. So, does it mean you need to worry? No. These kind of corrections happens every once a year. In fact, every once in 5 years, the market goes down by more than 30%. As you can see, in 2020, 38% down. In 2011, 26% down. In 2008, 60% down. And so many years of 30% down also. Every 10 years, the market goes down almost 50%. You can see that happened in 1992. That happened in almost 2008. Therein. So these corrections would come, but when you look at a longer term, this would basically pave way for market to grow. Now, the next chart, which is what I've showed to you now, that in 3 out of 4 years, despite the 10% intra-year decline, the market has returned a positive return. So you need not get scared from the market volatility, but use it to your benefit to increase your allocations to the equity market if you're underexposed to that segment as per your financial advisor therein. Yep, I'll end the case here. We can basically move to Q&A.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
HDFC team. Yeah. Hi, Diwakar.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing such a great insight in detail. So I think most of the things you have covered, sir. So I request all the participants, if you have any queries, kindly write it in the chat box. We'll take the question from there. Meanwhile, sir, a few questions which I would like to ask, like as we were talking about multi-cap fund. So, sir, multi-cap fund may 25% goes to large cap, 25% goes to mid cap, and 25% goes to small cap as per SEBI mandate. So, the remaining 25%, if we'll talk about now, so how the exposure is of Kotak multi-cap fund?
So दिवाकर अभी हमारा एक्सपोजर लार्ज कैप के अंदर 47% है
जी
और
सर.
मिड कैप स्मॉल कैप के अंदर 26 है.
Okay, so mostly it is major part is with large
लार्ज
cap.
कैप.
Done,
हाँ जी.
done. ओके। सर जैसा अभी जैसे कि जो जियो पॉलिटिकल टर्मोइल्स और बाकी जो ट्रम्प्स का स्टैंड रहा ऑन टैरिफ, देयर आर मेनी थिंग्स विच इज देयर इन लास्ट फ्यू वीक्स, लास्ट फ्यू मंथ्स। सो इसमें सर, डू वी हैव एनी टैक्टिकल कॉल ऑन आवर पोर्टफोलियो? आर वी टेकिंग एनी टैक्टिकल कॉल?
देखिए, ऐसा कोई साल नहीं गया पिछले 50-55 सालों में जब दो देश आपस में लड़ ना रहे हो।
जी।
ठीक है। तो ऐसा दो कंट्रीज तो आपस में हमेशा लड़ ही रही हैं, कोई ना कोई तो लड़ ही रहा है।
हाँ।
तो अब आप हर बार उस चीज पर रिएक्ट करेंगे तो आप लॉन्ग टर्म भूल के सिर्फ शॉर्ट टर्म पे फोकस करने लग जाएंगे। तो
करेक्ट।
सी, जब वॉर होता है डेफिनेटली एक सिचुएशन रहती है जहाँ पे आपको देखना चाहिए कि आपके स्टॉक्स कितना एक्सपोज्ड हैं, क्या क्या डिस्टर्बेंस हो सकती है। अब अगर मिडिल ईस्ट के अंदर वॉर होता है तो उसका सबसे बड़ा इम्पैक्ट होता है कच्चे तेल की आवागमन के ऊपर। और
करेक्ट।
हमारा इकोनॉमी कच्चे तेल के ऊपर बहुत बड़ी तरह से निर्भर है।
जी।
तो हमको देखना होता है कि हमारी कौन सी कंपनी के अंदर ताकत है उस शॉक को एब्जॉर्ब करने की, और कितने समय तक करने की। शॉक कुछ थोड़ा सा शॉक एब्जॉर्ब सबको ही कर सकते हैं।
जी।
कुछ समय का शॉक एब्जॉर्ब थोड़ी अच्छी कंपनियां कर सकती हैं। बट बहुत लंबे समय का कोई जो इशू डिस्टर्बेंस आएगा उसको
हम्म।
सब लोग कोई हैंडल नहीं कर सकता। तो आपको उस तरह से देखना पड़ता है, व्यू बनाना ही पड़ेगा। बट अभी क्या है कि हमारी इकोनॉमी का जो क्रूड पे डिपेंडेंस है वो धीरे धीरे कम हो रहा है, बिकॉज अदर फॉर्म ऑफ एनर्जी इज ऑल्सो इंक्रीजिंग। ऐसा नहीं है कि खत्म हो रहा है, बट कम हो रहा है धीरे धीरे।
जी।
राइट। आज हमारे पास सोलर है, हम कोल से पावर बना रहे हैं, हमारे पास गैस भी अवेलेबल है। राइट, तो वो सब चल रहा है। बट हाँ, अगर कच्चे तेल के ऊपर कुछ व्यवधान आएगा तो डेफिनेटली हमारी इकोनॉमी को होएगा। तो आपको देखना होता है कि आपका पोर्टफोलियो ज्यादा एक्सपोज तो नहीं है उन क्षेत्रों में जिसका इम्पैक्ट ज्यादा हो। अगर है तो आप उसको कम कर पाते हैं उस टाइम पे।
डन।
बट अगर आपका व्यू है कि 2-4 दिन में सुलझ जाएगा, ये
हाँ।
सुलझ जाएगा, वो मामला सुलझ जा लिया जाएगा, तो देन यू नीड नॉट टेक अ कॉल।
गॉट इट सर। तो सर बेसिकली आई थिंक इवन एट द लास्ट आपने काफी बात की जहाँ पे आप बोल रहे थे कि मार्केट में वोलेटिलिटी तो रहेगी। सो एंड हम ये नहीं सोच सकते हैं कि भाई ऐसा सिचुएशन नहीं आएगा। सो फॉर द लॉन्ग टर्म इन्वेस्टर, इफ विल टॉक अबाउट, सो इफ सच वोलेटिलिटी इज देयर इन द नियर टर्म, सो शुड वी इंक्रीज आवर एक्सपोजर इन इक्विटी मार्केट? और इफ किसी की अगर एसआईपी कंटिन्यू है, सो वो एसआईपी भी बढ़ानी चाहिए, या फिर इफ वी हैव सम सरप्लस फंड वी कैन पुट इट नाउ इफ इट इज देयर, इफ इट इज सरप्लस?
ओके। सी, सबसे पहले तो जो एसेट एलोकेशन है ना, वो एक बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण डिसीजन है। वो
करेक्ट।
आपको अपने वित्तीय सलाहकार की सहायता के साथ ही लेना चाहिए। यू शुड ऑलवेज कंसल्ट योर फाइनेंशियल एडवाइजर फॉर दैट, बिकॉज वही आपको बता पाएंगे कि आपका इक्विटी में कितना एक्सपोजर होना चाहिए, डेट में कितना होना चाहिए, गोल्ड में कितना होना चाहिए, इस तरह से। ठीक है। अगर आप अंडर एक्सपोज हैं तो ये जो वॉलेटाइल टाइम आता है, ये डेफिनेटली एक बहुत अच्छा टाइम है आपके एक्सपोजर को बढ़ाने का इक्विटी मार्केट में। बट जैसा मैंने कहा कि ये एक बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण डिसीजन है जो आपको बिना किसी चर्चा के या विचार विमर्श के नहीं करना चाहिए हमारे
करेक्ट।
हिसाब से। इसमें वित्तीय सलाहकार की राय जरूर लेनी चाहिए। बट अगर आप मुझे बोलते हैं कि मेरा 5 साल 10 साल का क्या व्यू है, क्या मैं आज इक्विटी मार्केट में पैसा लगाऊं तो हमको पैसा मिलेगा, और बनेगा तो कितना बन सकता है। तो हम हमेशा ये बोलते हैं कि इक्विटी मार्केट में गारंटीड रिटर्न तो कोई नहीं होता। ठीक है। बट अगर आप प्रोबेबिलिटीज की बात करें, ठीक है, तो क्या प्रोबेबिलिटीज है कि आपका पैसा आने वाले टाइम में बढ़ेगा, तो उसकी प्रोबेबिलिटी बहुत ज्यादा है। ऐसा क्यों है मैं बताता हूँ। सी, आज हमारी इकोनॉमी 6.5-7% की दर से बढ़ रही है। 3 से 4% हमारा इन्फ्लेशन है। तो 11% का नॉमिनल जीडीपी ग्रोथ रेट हमारी कंट्री का है। टिपिकली जो कॉर्पोरेट है उसका अर्निंग जो ग्रो करता है वो 100 से 200 बेसिस पॉइंट हाई ग्रो करता है नॉमिनल जीडीपी से। तो अगर आप कॉर्पोरेट अर्निंग आपकी 12% से ग्रो करती है या 13% से ग्रो करती है, तो यानी 5 से 6 साल में आपकी अर्निंग्स डबल हो जाएंगी। 10 से 12 साल में आपकी अर्निंग्स 4 गुना हो जाएंगी। तो अगर आपका पी मल्टीपल सेम भी रहा और मार्केट कैप आपकी अर्निंग के साथ साथ चली, तो आपका जो फंड है, आपका जो मार्केट कैप है, वो 4 गुना होने की बहुत ज्यादा गुंजाइश है अगले 10 से 12 सालों में। तो मेरे हिसाब से एक बहुत ही एक अच्छा रिटर्न होगा अगर अगले 10 से 12 साल में आप किसी के इन्वेस्टर का निवेश 4 गुना हो जाए। अब अगर इसके अंदर मार्केट का मल्टीपल बढ़ गया तो वो थोड़ा जल्दी हो सकता है। मार्केट का मल्टीपल थोड़ा सा कम हो गया तो थोड़ा सा देर से हो सकता है।
देर से हो
तो
सकता
बट
है।
एक हाई प्रोबेबिलिटी के साथ हम बोल सकते हैं कि अगले 10-12 सालों में निवेशक का पैसा 4 गुना होने की संभावना काफी हाई है।
डन। तो फॉर द इन्वेस्टर्स एंड फॉर द पार्टिसिपेंट्स जिन्होंने कॉल ज्वाइन किया है, सो वन थिंग विच आई वुड लाइक टू अगेन हाईलाइट, जैसा कि अभी सर ने भी बताया कि अगर आपके पास सरप्लस फंड है, अगर आपका होराइजन लंबा है, तो सबसे पहली चीज़ तो आपके जो रिलेशनशिप मैनेजर हैं जहां से आप सो HDFC सिक्योरिटीज अगेन, सो सम रिलेशनशिप मैनेजर वुड बी देयर at our ends. Kindly get in touch with them and ask what all the options are available with us. So वो आपको काफ़ी अच्छे से बता सकते हैं कि क्या क्या ऑप्शंस हैं अवेलेबल हमारे पास, जो जिसमें आप इन्वेस्ट कर सकते हैं। एंड होराइजन अगर काफ़ी लंबा है तो डेफिनेटली इक्विटी एक्सपोजर थोड़ा ज़रूर लीजिए, अगर आपका एक्सपोजर कम है तो। अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट सर, सो लास्ट में आपने जैसा कि प्रेजेंटेशन के दौरान कहा था कि 12% का एक्सपेक्टेशन इज अ गुड एक्सपेक्टेशन इफ द होराइजन इज लॉन्ग। सो इज दिस द एक्सपेक्टेशन विच एवरीबडी शुड कीप फॉर द लॉन्ग लॉन्ग टर्म, और मतलब और वी कैन एक्सपेक्ट लिटिल मोर?
सी, ग्रीड की तो कोई सीमा होती नहीं, और ये
जी।
दही मांगे मोर हमेशा रहता ही है। तो
करेक्ट।
ये तो जो मैं आपको रिटर्न बता रहा हूँ ना, ये एक इंडेक्स का रिटर्न है, निफ्टी 50 का रिटर्न है। ठीक है। अगर आपने मल्टी कैप में या मिड कैप में या स्मॉल कैप में एक्सपोजर लिया है, या एक्टिव फंड्स में जहाँ पे आपका अल्फा भी बना है, तो वहां पे अगर आपका 200-300 बेस पॉइंट का अल्फा आता है, तो दैट इज ओवर द टॉप ऑफ दिस। अब तो उसके हिसाब से हमको लगता है कि लो डबल डिजिट और एन अर्ली टीज नंबर आई थिंक इज अ प्रीटी गुड नंबर टू गो फॉर। इसके बियॉन्ड, थैंक यू स्टार्स, थैंक गॉड फॉर द एक्सेस रिटर्न एंड बी हैप्पी।
Done. ठीक है सर, some questions from the participants. So if you can put some light on gold and silver, that is also asset class which people are talking about. So if you can put some light on that.
सी, गोल्ड जो एसेट क्लास है, एक बहुत ही अच्छा प्रदर्शन किया है उसने पिछले काफी सालों से, और स्पेसिफिकली भारतीय निवेशकों के लिए तो उसने पिछला एक साल पिछले साल ऐसा भी टाइम था जब गोल्ड का रिटर्न इक्विटी के रिटर्न से ज्यादा था या ऑलमोस्ट बराबर था। तो आप गोल्ड को हमेशा बना के रखिए अपने पास, उसको मेटल को रखिए एज अ निवेशक। बट इसके साथ साथ आपको प्रोडक्टिव एसेट्स के अंदर भी आपको अपना काम जरूरी है। जैसे इक्विटी मार्केट हो गया, या आपको जरूरत के लिए लिक्विडिटी चाहिए तो आपको डेट भी रखिए। तो एक बैलेंस अप्रोच बना के चलेंगे तो बेहतर है। गोल्ड एंड सिल्वर, एक जब ग्लोबल में वॉलेटिलिटी ज्यादा बढ़ जाती है तो उसमें उसकी, कहते हैं, थोड़ी सी डिमांड ज्यादा हो जाती है, जो आज के दिनों में हो रहा है। जैसे मैंने बताया था, $60 ट्रिलियन के एसेट्स जो हैं यूएस के, वो नॉन यूएस ओनर्स के पास है, जो नॉन यूएस सिटीजन के पास है। अब
हम्म।
जब वो वापस जा रहा है यूएस से, लोगों का थोड़ा सा विश्वास कम हुआ है कि उन्होंने बोला कि आज की डेट में उन्होंने रिपेट्रिएशन टैक्स जब से लगाया, तो लोगों को लगा कि हमारा पैसा रोक लिया, उन्होंने टैक्स लगा रहे हैं। तो इंक्रीमेंटल पैसा यूएस में जाना थोड़ा मुश्किल लग रहा है। और उससे जो पैसा बाहर जा रहा है, अब वो किसी ना किसी फॉर्म में तो रहेगा। वो तो इमर्जिंग मार्केट में आएगा या डेवलप मार्केट में जाएगा, कुछ गोल्ड में भी जाएगा। स्पेसिफिकली सॉवरेन फंड जो है, जो गवर्नमेंट्स हैं, चाइनीज गवर्नमेंट हो गई, भारतीय सरकार हो गई, ये सब गोल्ड की खरीदारी कर रहे हैं। तो एक, आई थिंक गोल्ड का तो भी आने वाले टाइम में कुछ रहेगा, बोलबाला हुआ रहेगा।
रहेगा।
जहां तक
ओके।
सिल्वर का सवाल है, सिल्वर के प्रेशियस मेटल तो है ही, बट उसके साथ साथ उसके इंडस्ट्रियल यूजेस भी हैं, जिसके कारण वो थोड़ा ज्यादा वोलेटाइल रहता है। बट
हम्म।
अभी हमारा व्यू सिल्वर पे भी कंस्ट्रक्टिव है। हमको लगता है कि जो न्यू एज इकोनॉमी है, जैसे इलेक्ट्रॉनिक कार्स हैं, इलेक्ट्रिक कार्स हैं, उनके
जी।
अंदर सिल्वर का यूजेज है। जो सोलर पैनल है उनके अंदर सिल्वर का यूजेज है। जो आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस है उसके अंदर आपको डेटा की स्पीड बहुत ज्यादा चाहिए होती है, तो सिल्वर इज द बेस्ट मेटल फॉर कंडक्टिविटी। तो वहां पे भी उसकी यूजेज ज्यादा बढ़ रही है। तो जैसे जैसे ये सब चीजें बढ़ेंगी, सिल्वर का भी यूजेज बढ़ रहा है, और खदान तो उसकी नई खुली नहीं है, तो उसमें भी लगता है कि थोड़ा अभी झुकाव ज्यादा है।
Okay. So I think the important part is asset allocation is very important. So from the perspective of investor, I believe आपका asset allocation kindly recheck आपका allocation किस asset class में कितना है, and accordingly you can invest in different asset classes as per your need. And sir, so अगर हम मल्टी कैप की बात करते हैं, सो इट इज़ फॉर इन्वेस्टर्स, इनको मैं इसका रिटर्न भी बता देता हूँ। सो कोटक मल्टी कैप हैज़ गिवन 7.5% return in 1 year. In last 2 year, the CAGR is around 29%, and in last 3 years, the fund has given 26.8% return. This is CAGR I'm talking about. So, sir, the strategy which we follow, आपने strategy की भी बात की थी during the presentation. So, sir, how it is different from other peers in the same category?
देखिए, हम लोग जो कोटक में जो स्ट्रैटेजी यूज करते हैं ना, हमारी फिलॉसफी है BMB। बी माने बिजनेस, कितना
जी।
सुदृढ़ बिजनेस है, उसकी क्या पोटेंशियल है, कितना अच्छे से वो पैसा और कितना ग्रो कर सकता है और किस तरीके से ग्रो कर सकता है। देन हमारा आता है मैनेजमेंट, उसको चलाने वाले कितने काबिल हैं, उनका पास्ट ट्रैक रिकॉर्ड कैसा है, वो छोटे इन्वेस्टरों के प्रति, निवेशकों के प्रति संवेदनशील है कि नहीं, उन्होंने पास्ट में कोई चीटिंग वीटिंग तो नहीं की। ये सब हम देखते हैं मैनेजमेंट के अंदर, उसकी कैपेबिलिटी कितनी है। तीसरा आता है वैल्यूएशन। हमने ये पाया है कि इंडिया जो है ना, वो ग्रोथ मार्केट है। यहाँ पे आप डिविडेंड के लिए नहीं करते, प्राइस टू बुक के लिए नहीं करते। जब तक मार्केट में आप आते हैं तो आप ग्रोथ के लिए आते हैं, क्योंकि ये मार्केट सबसे ज्यादा ग्रो कर रहा है, ये सबसे तेजी से ग्रो कर रहा है। तो इंडिया में ग्रोथ पर स्टॉक को ही बढ़ावा मिलता है। बट हम लोग ऐसा नहीं बोलते कि ग्रोथ है तो कुछ भी वैल्यू भी दे दो। हम हमेशा बोलते हैं ग्रोथ एट अ रीजनेबल प्राइस, गार। तो उसको मैंने मद्देनजर रखते हुए हम अपने स्टॉक के अंदर निवेश करते हैं। आइडिया यही रहता है कि हमको अर्निंग्स ग्रोथ भी मिले और मल्टीपल रीरेटिंग का स्कोप भी मिले। तो दोनों चीजें जब मिलती हैं, कोशिश करते हैं कि वो स्टॉक अपने पोर्टफोलियो में आए। और ये पोर्टफोलियो में, क्योंकि ये मल्टी कैप है, जहाँ पे हम किसी भी मार्केट कैप का स्टॉक डाल सकते हैं, कोशिश यही होती है कि जो भी बेस्ट स्टॉक है बॉटम ऑफ स्टॉक आइडिया रिसर्च से, उसको हम इस पोर्टफोलियो में शामिल कर पाए।
Correct. Okay, great sir. So one more question from the participant. So sir, आज के टाइम में काफी डिस्कशन है इंटरनेशनल इक्विटी को लेके भी, जहाँ पे लोगों का कहना है कि एक कुछ सेक्टर ऐसे हैं जो इंडिया में बहुत ज़्यादा मैच्योर नहीं हुए हैं, बाहर काफ़ी हैं. सो कंसिडरिंग दैट, व्हाट डू यू थिंक, इवन द इंटरनेशनल इक्विटी एक्सपोजर इज इम्पोर्टेंट इन द पोर्टफोलियो, और द वे वी आर सीइंग इंडिया, द ग्रोथ विच वी आर सीइंग इन इंडिया इज गुड इनफ टू गेट सम गुड रिटर्न?
देखिए, दोनों तरीके से बात कर सकते हैं। इंडिया का ग्रोथ रेट विश्व में सबसे ज्यादा है, तो आपको यहाँ पे ओवरऑल मार्केट का ग्रोथ मिल रहा है। तो इसमें कोई दो राय नहीं कि इंडिया एज अ मार्केट आपको होना ही चाहिए। बट आपने ये भी कहा कि कुछ क्षेत्र ऐसे हैं जहाँ पे इंडिया में विकसित नहीं हुए, या वो अपॉर्चुनिटीज इंडिया में अभी बहुत छोटी हैं। तो उन क्षेत्रों में अगर आप स्पेसिफिकली निवेश करना चाहते हैं, तो आप ओवरसीज इन्वेस्टमेंट कर सकते हैं। ये डेफिनेटली एक आपके पोर्टफोलियो को डाइवर्सिफाई करता है, हेज देता है पोर्टफोलियो को। तो हाँ, ये एक उपयुक्त तरीका है। बट आपको पता होना चाहिए आप किस उद्देश्य से ओवरसीज इन्वेस्टमेंट कर रहे हैं। आपको पोर्टफोलियो डाइवर्सिफिकेशन करना है। सिर्फ रिटर्न चेस करेंगे तो उससे उद्देश्य वो नहीं होता। आपको वो, अगर क्षेत्र में निवेश के लिए आपको लगता है, आपका व्यू है कि वो क्षेत्र के स्टॉक्स में हमको निवेश करना है जो इंडिया में नहीं है, आप बेझिझक कीजिए, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है।
Bilkul. I think, sir, we have covered most of the queries and most of the questions from the participants, as well as we have discussed many important things during this webinar. So, thank you, sir, for taking out the time and joining this webinar for such a great insights which you have shared. And I would thank all the participants time निकाल के जो आपने webinar को सुना. So, thank you everyone. And I request everyone to go to our Invest Right app, wherein you can see multiple options for the investment, and kindly get in touch with your relationship manager, wherein you will get more idea about all the options are available with us. So thank you, sir, and thank you all the participants.
थैंक यू।